I call David Seymour, 5 minutes.
Mr Speaker, it's a great pleasure to rise on behalf of the ACT Party in support of this bill. And I think one way that part of this bill might be characterised, Mr Speaker, is that it is the Fiscal Responsibility Act for ACC, long overdue. There was a time when governments would enter the beehive and discover what the books really said all too late. As Muldoon said to Longy on election night, I've got a surprise for you in the morning. The Fiscal Responsibility Act changed that because it required the books to be open, transparent, and allowed voters to hold the government to account in full knowledge of the facts. And for that alone, I commend the Minister, perhaps a young Ruth Richardson, for this Fiscal Responsibility Act for ACC. But there's another aspect to this bill, Mr Speaker, that is a boon to younger generations of New Zealanders. And it was very interesting to listen to Kevin Haig's contribution, which I have to say I thought in many ways was a very sound contribution right up until he arrived at his conclusions. He argued that a normal insurance company, that is a private enterprise insurance company, would make sure that it had fully funded its future liabilities because it might not have the same set of levy payers or premium payers next year or the year after as it had this year. Therefore, it has to fund its future liabilities this year. And it is true of ACC as well. Because there are differences in the size and the activity and behaviour of different generations. There are people that enter and exit the workforce. There are people who enter and exit New Zealand. As New Zealand First know, sometimes people with funny-sounding names come here. And so it is not true to say that we have exactly the same set of levy payers from one year to the next. And so it is correct that in any given year, the future liabilities generated by the activities of the levy payers that year should be fully future funded, just as a private firm would do. And the most significant part of this bill is what it brings forward in terms of fairness between generations. As the much larger baby boomer workforce retires, those of us who are a bit younger and will be paying ACC levies for some time will be relieved of our smaller workforce having to pay this particular aspect of the social contract for that much larger workforce that did a lot more dangerous stuff back then. So this is a very positive move, not only for fiscal transparency, but for intergenerational fairness. However, I think we've heard, particularly in the contribution from the Labour members, an eerie warning that the politics will always be with ACC. So long as the people who contest power to sit on these benches ultimately hold the purse strings of ACC, it is inevitable that in spite of the very able minister's bill to try and introduce fairness and transparency to ACC, different governments of the day pursuing different prerogatives and different fiscal conditions will try to use ACC to either top up the surplus, as Labour accuses the current government of doing, or perhaps to give people a discount on their ACC levies, as the current government accuses Labour of having done. And the lesson is that so long as ACC remains an entity and a creature of the state, the politics will always be with it. Inevitable political meddling will mean that people get a little bit less sometimes, a little bit more others, and the only people who really win are the politicians. The answer Sue Moroney gives that, well, it would all be better if good people like me were running it, quite frankly, does not pass muster. So, Mr Speaker, I commend this bill to the House. I commend the Honourable Minister, who has done some very good public policy work in introducing what is a Fiscal Responsibility Act for ACC and for striking a blow for generational fairness in this very large account. Nonetheless, it would be much better to sell it all and have a private enterprise system. Thank you, Mr Speaker.